The Academy Awards, the most fancy circle jerk in the world. Sometimes they award shit, sometimes they award true greatness. Everyone's got something to say about them. Some say they don't matter, at the same time say, so-and-so should have been nominated for an Oscar. For eons, people have complained that their favorite comic book movies haven't been nominated. To them I say, why don't you give the nominees a try? They can't be that bad, right? Well, today, in a video that no one asked for, I'm going to list off all 8 of them. Let's stop wasting time and look at number 8, a real waste of time.
Junk imported from Europe and surrounded by vast...
Mank follows the story of screenwriter Herman J. Mankiewicz and the events that led him to write the script for Citizen Kane, you know, only the greatest film in the world. It's directed by David Fincher, the only real established director of the nominees. I like a fair bit of his work, but he's pretty inconsistent. He's the film bro director, and it gets a little irritating hearing all these regurgitated takes about him. Do you have any idea how many times people have brought up this specific video? Anyways, the production design is pretty good here. The film puts in little touches to give a feel of classic Hollywood. The lighting is incredibly dramatic and dynamic. The costumes are period accurate and provide personality to the characters. The makeup is very good and does a fine job recreating the stars and starlets of the era. Mr. Self-Destruct himself, Trent Reznor, is back with Atticus Ross for their 4th collaboration with Mr. Fincher. This soundtrack provides a faithful recreation of the era's music, really driving home the feeling that we are living in the 1930s. We've really come a long way from March of the Pigs. Eric Messerschmitt's cinematography uses little tricks to invoke the era, like having notes on screen, overly dramatic zooms, exaggerated fade-outs, and fake cars. The sound design, I think, is mixed in mono. Amanda Seyfield did a great job as Marianne Davis. She really nailed that classic Hollywood starlet inflection.
I've been a little 6s and 7s recently. Tell me something, Mank. The truth. Could you see me playing Elizabeth Barrett Browning or Marie Antoinette? Irving's bought them both. You know, because of pop.
Charles Dance is perfectly cast as William Randolph Hearst, bringing forth a silent form of uneasiness. This may all sound good, but the film is incredibly flawed. Gary Oldman plays Mank. Gary Oldman is an acting chameleon with many great roles under his belt. Mank is maybe one of them, but maybe not. He poses a lot of eloquence, but I can't bring myself to care about him at all. He loves to crack jokes, but comes across as a blubbering douche. He is terribly miscast. Not once did I believe this was a guy in his 40s. The age difference between him and everybody else is laughably bad. Lily Collins is underwritten as hell. She does nothing the whole film. Really, the whole thing drags on, with an uninteresting story that does not warrant its length. And in the end, it feels like you've learned nothing. It just feels pointless. The dialogue is that classic Hollywood wit, but it just feels so empty. Characters will laugh on screen while you'll just stare blankly. The dialogue is way too fast for its own good. I had to keep rewinding in order to hear the uninteresting dialogue. It gets a bit irritating that this was shot on digital and presented in widescreen instead of, you know, the classic format. The biggest offender is downplaying Orson Welles' contributions to Citizen Kane and propping Mank up as a genius, which has been proven false for the past 40 years. Really, it makes Orson Welles out to be a pretentious asshole when really Mank acts like that the entire film. It's completely outdated and adds nothing to the conversation. Oh, and this film does not hold your hand at all. If you have no point of reference for classic Hollywood, then you will be absolutely lost. So if you haven't seen Citizen Kane, then none of this will make any sense. This film is really hard to recommend to anybody. Maybe if you like classic Hollywood or lavish production design, but otherwise, a hard no. Mank gets 5 throws out of 10. It's nice to look at, but it's so hard to sit through. Instead, I'll recommend Citizen Kane, or Orson Welles' other movies, or hell, even All About Eve. I'm sure all of these choices are vastly superior to Mank.
See? Watch out! Oh, Jesus Christ, how did you do that? Experience.
The trial of the Chicago 7 is based on the trial of the same name, where 7 activists are placed on trial for supposedly inciting a riot. It's directed by Aaron Sorkin, you know, probably the most famous screenwriter in Hollywood right now. He's certainly talented, but I feel some of his phrase is really over-exaggerated. All his little Sorkinisms are here. Fast, quippy dialogue with characters being the smartest in the room. It's constantly flowing and never slows down. The editing matches that pace by cutting back and forth between the past and the present without any pause. The acting is fine. Everyone does what they're supposed to. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is fine. John Carroll Lynch is fine. Mark Rylance is fine. Yahya Abdul-Mateen II isn't bad. Eddie Redmayne is very American. No one is really bad here, it's just they don't stand out. The exception being Sacha Baron Cohen as Abby Hoffman. Honestly, the strongest part of the film. Sacha plays a character that mirrors himself in a way, and really owns it. He's very charismatic and just steals every single scene he's in.
Bands will play rock music. There will be public fornication, likely some of it with the wives and mistresses of delegates. Psychedelic, long-haired leftists will consort with dope users. And we're going to insist that the next president of the United States stop sending our friends to be slaughtered.
If you're familiar or not with the trial, the story is what you'd expect. Cons. This film looks okay. The cinematography doesn't stand out that much. Visually, it's the blandest of all the nominees. Stylistically, it just looks too conventional. The film is really on the nose sometimes. It's Sorkinism at its worst. The antagonists are portrayed as cartoonishly evil. Frank Langella does make you hate him, but it feels like there's no substance at all to him. The heroes always deliver passionate, heart-driven speeches while the villains are all cold and no fun at all. The politics are Aaron Sorkin politics, so you should know what to expect by now. You know how Aaron Sorkin can't write female characters? Well, this film does not help his case at all, and the ending is just awful. It's like the movie's holding up a sign that says, "Okay audience, please clap now." The ending is so on the nose that I'm going to partially spoil it. Basically, it throws a bunch of cliches, all at once, in the span of like 5 minutes. Someone does an honorable thing, and everyone clapped. The epilogue feels like someone going, "See, I was right this whole time." It isn't a difficult watch. It's honestly the perfect movie to have playing in the background because of how safe it is. I would recommend, maybe, but with caution. If you don't like Sorkin, this won't change your opinion at all. Trial of the Chicago 7 gets 6 throws out of 10. It's pretty safe. It isn't awful, but I wouldn't call it good. It's just bland. I once had a teacher who was such a shill for Aaron Sorkin that he bought his masterclass. And maybe I should buy his masterclass so I can make a movie as mediocre as this. We have Promising Young Woman, the debut film by Emerald Fennell, a story that follows a woman named Casey, hell-bent on bringing forth her version of justice. The film is very vindictive towards the various nice guys of today, and how their patterns of thinking are flawed and filled with hypocrisy. It directly confronts rape culture and puts it in a corner. It's a very modern script that's very in tune to today's trends. The story isn't told outright, so the audience wants to keep watching and find out why things are as they are. Casey is betrayed by Carey Mulligan. I've always considered Carey Mulligan a very overlooked actress. From what I've seen, she's always great. This is her second Oscar nomination. Her first one was An Education, which she should have won for, instead of this trash. Oh wait, Alfred Molina's in both these movies. For Promising Young Woman, I'd say her performance makes the film.
I thought we had a connection, I guess.
A connection? Okay. What do I do for a living? Sorry, maybe that one's too hard. How old am I? How long have I lived in the city?
Far and away, it's the best performance, and borderline carries the movie. Bo Burnham is Bo Burnham. He's fine in the film. If you hate his comedy, then you'll get annoyed at him. Clancy Brown is Casey's dad. He's a nice old fellow. Alison Brie is Brie Flea in this, and she's not half bad. Let's also give a shout out to Chris Lowell, no spoilers. The color correction is what you'd expect from your typical indie movie nowadays. Production design is very lively and very modern. The design team clearly put a lot of effort into the scenery. The costume design is pretty good. Casey's various outfits reflect her state of mind. The various sleaze bags are how you'd expect them to dress, with the whole fedora. The sound isn't half bad. One of the climactic scenes, no spoilers, has some very subtle but excellent sound design. The film, I'd say, is a subversion of the rape revenge genre from the 1970s. Instead of showing the act itself, the film dons a more empathetic eye towards its victims. The word is never said, nor ever shown. At times, it reminded me of Takashi Miike's Audition. You know, the best date movie ever. Thank me later. Unfortunately, the film's editing leans towards some sloppiness and comes across as amateurish, meaning that it breaks the golden rule of editing. The film's pacing is not perfect. The first act is maybe too strong for its own good. It starts off with a good balance of comedy and uneasiness, but then divulges into a more romantic angle, which is probably the weakest subplot of the film. It's your standard indie romance with a bit of a twist, but it's pretty predictable. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really enjoy much of Bo Burnham's parts. Ben Karkin's cinematography doesn't stand out too much. It just feels kind of normal. The film has many cringe-inducing moments, mostly in how it shows men being pigs, but one scene was too cringeworthy for me, and not for the right reasons. Let's just say it involves a hit 2006 pop song. Yes, this film's jukebox is dance and pop music, which fits the bright aesthetics. It's certainly an enjoyable experience with some damning commentary, but the film gets worse the more I think about it. It feels a bit amateurish, but I'll cut it some slack because this is the director's first film. Promising Young Woman gets 7 throws out of 10. It's very approachable and much more enjoyable than the past 2 entries. The cherry on top is the title. Well played. The Sound of Metal is Sound of Metal is Darius Martyr's first narrative film. This project was previously attached to Derek Seinfranz, whom Darius has collaborated with before. The Sound of Metal follows a drummer who begins to lose his hearing. Disclaimer, this isn't about metal music, and instead focuses on the deaf community. For its tone, it is surprisingly lax. The film features a very respectable look towards the deaf community, showing us the basics of sign language and how a deaf person perceives its world. The script is of acceptance and accountability. Everyone here is flawed, but they aren't irredeemable. Many of the performers are actual members of the deaf community. Riz Ahmed shines as Ruben, the drummer of the group. My shirt. He actually did all of his drumming and learned ASL for this role. He beautifully conveys a victim of changes. He says a lot without needing to speak, but sometimes comes across as volatile.
And all this shit, like, what does it matter? What does it matter? It just passes. Yo, if I disappear, like, who cares? Nobody cares, man. Seriously. Yo, and that's okay. That's life. That's life. No, for real, okay? It just passes. It just fucking passes.
He never comes across as unnatural. He really just lives the character. Olivia Cooke portrays the vocalist of the group, Lou. She has good taste. She hasn't given much, but she did her singing, which sounds relatively good. Olivia even wrote the opening track, Purify, which sounds way better than the other Purify. Oh god.
He fucking left the band!
Paul Reese stands out as Joe, a man who runs a deaf community. He acts as a fatherly figure, always with a calm demeanor. The type you don't want to disappoint. He signs most of his dialogue, but he is still utterly expressive. Mathieu Amalric briefly shows up at one point, and he definitely nails his character. No spoilers. The cinematography done by Daniel Bouquet feels intimate and not highly stylized, giving a very homely feeling. Concert scenes have very dynamic lighting, while the deaf community scenes are naturally lit. contrasting the two lifestyles. For the pacing, it gets less frantic as we move along, which really matches Ruben's state of mind. Shocker, the soundtrack isn't actually metal, and instead leans more towards noise rock. Geez, the sound design is perfect, yes, it's true. It does a phenomenal job illustrating the world, making a song for the deaf. In actuality, it deserves to be heard on the best possible sound system, and not on your
fucking telephone. Get real.
It's unsettling for your own ears, and it makes you fear for your own hearing. The editing cleverly switches between the world of the deaf and the hearing. It's a technical tour de force that continuously surprises you. Cons, well, I wish Olivia Cook's character was given more to do. She seems, I don't know, underwritten? The pacing might be off-putting. Going in with the wrong expectations might lead to hating the story. Being that the tone at the start doesn't reflect the rest of the movie. Despite that, it's very easy to recommend, and probably the most casual of the nominees. Technically sound with great acting, 8.5 throws out of 10, maybe higher. Oh yeah, and there's a Spinal Tap reference.
I could have put it at 11.
These go to 11.
Nomadland is the third film directed by Chloe Zhao. Chloe Zhao is the first Asian American woman to be nominated for a Directing Academy Award. The film follows a woman named Vern who drives around in her van, which is also her home, starring Frances McDormand. What a career she's had. For 30 years she's given us so many excellent performances. She's been nominated for an Academy Award 6 times. First one for Fargo in 1996. Honestly, a hilarious performance. Definitely deserved. Then she won in 2018 for 3 Billboards over Ebbings, Missouri. Another excellent performance. Now in Nomadland, Frances gives a very raw and mellow performance. Through the power of method acting, she lived in a van for a couple of months.
Get out of there, Terry! Get out! Get out!
Fine, he's fine. He's fine. Look,
Oh no! What is it? What's he speeding him? Oh!
probably chicken.
No, it's rabbits! Oh!
The film isn't really focused on having a strong narrative, and instead focuses on McDormand's character and the various personalities that she meets along the way. Much of the film's runtime is filled with various character moments that don't really add much to the narrative, besides developing the world that these characters live in. A lot of these moments don't have any narrative payoff, they just come and go. The editing skips out on events that you would expect to happen, like characters about to say goodbye, we skip the goodbye, and we see them leaving already. The film is constantly going forward, just like its main character, who's constantly driving across the West. Constantly looking forward and not looking back. The various personalities we see in this film aren't depicted under a hateful eye. They're treated like normal people. They aren't filmed to look like freaks. Quite the opposite. Everyone's skin looks weirdly smooth in this movie. Cinematography gives a very intimate feel. It lets us breathe into the various landscapes that Fern wanders onto. The film is also really grainy a lot of the time. The character's simple lifestyle is also reflected in the lighting, which appears to be mostly entirely natural. The film's sound design isn't bombastic at all, and instead very minimal. But if you pay close attention, it gives a very just naturey feeling. As I was watching, I was wondering, who the hell are all these actors? And why haven't I heard of them? And it turns out they're not actors. And because of this, the film is kind of exploitive. Real people tell their actual stories, not for the sake of entertainment, to a fake person, who in turn tells her false story and is believed wholeheartedly. Said fake character takes these stories on her actual narrative journey, despite not existing, which feels ethically weird. You ever hear that expression, it's just a movie? Well, apparently they weren't even aware that they were in a movie. They didn't even know who Frances McDormand was. Despite that, we get some very raw performances that just feel real. The film is maybe too objective for its own sake. It doesn't really seem to comment too much on the economic status of the characters. We see real estate agents, we have various scenes inside an Amazon factory, but it doesn't really mean much in the end for the movie. We even see the Avengers. I hope I'm not too harsh on this film. I honestly enjoyed the experience. I'm really impressed how Chloe Zhao was able to capture the American spirit in a sense, despite only immigrating to the United States when she was in high school. I thought Frances McDormand was great. I liked the cinematography. I liked the subtle sound design. I like the dialogue, per se. But be warned, it's kind of slow, so you gotta watch it on the right day. Would I recommend this to Marvel fans? Maybe not. I would probably rate it an 8.5 to maybe a 9. Max von Sydow throws out of 10. And well, would you look at that? It also features our favorite Chinese-hating musician. No joke, look this up.
Best you stay behind there.
Judas and the Black Messiah. This is a true story of FBI informant William O'Neill, who infiltrated the Illinois Black Panthers in the 1960s, specifically to target chairman Fred Hampton. This is director Shaka King's second film. His first film, no one watched, and it apparently wasn't good. Well, the opposite applies to Judas. It's an interesting story, especially because it's actuality. Anyone unfamiliar with this event will be shocked at what more or less actually occurred. It's both an inspiring and harrowing story with uncomfortable relevancy. The film doesn't rush through set pieces. Instead, it gives us time to understand a sanitized version of the Black Panthers, the two supporting roles. Get your shit straight, Academy. Just wow. Just wow. Daniel Kaluuya gives an absolutely commanding performance as Fred Hampton with such a dominant presence. Just look at the man's eyes, always focused, always staring deep into your soul, all through a Chicago accent.
I believe I'm gonna die doing what I was born for. I believe I'm gonna die half the people. I'm gonna die for the people because I live for the people. I live for the people because I love the people.
He was good in Get Out, but here, he just awoke a whole new beast of a performance that I had no idea he was capable of. Speaking of Get Out, first of all, Lil Rel Howery plays a pimp, and Lakeith Stanfield, who has been on my radar for quite a while. I've been waiting for this man to break out with a spectacular, good performance. And damn, he did it here with William O'Neill. His eyes tell a whole different story. This guy's eyes are just jittering. I mean, his whole body is jittering. He always sounds like he's unsure of every single word he's saying.
You think in your mind I'm gonna pick up a stone fox and this bad motherfucker right here and start it up with a goddamn screwdriver in the ignition? I had my boy replace the lock, motherfucker. Come on, man. God dog, man.
Jesse Plemons is also in this film, and he's pretty detestable, but never played off as a villain, more like a spoke on the wheel. A rather subtle performance. Shout out to Ashton Sanders for a standout performance as Jimmy Palmer, and Dominique Fishback for a very spectacular performance as Deborah Johnson. The film is very nice to look at. It is cleverly shot with some visually appealing lighting. The cinematography is very impactful. The movie really just nails its aesthetics. What else can you expect from Steve McQueen's main man, Sean Bobbitt? Costumes are also really sleek. The editing does its job, really illustrating the chaotic nature of violence and effectively bridging together the past and the present. The film features an original soundtrack done by Mark Asam, intermittent with period-appropriate music. If there's a flawed Judas and the Black Messiah, it's that it could have scratched an even deeper surface. This is a Hollywood biopic, so the film doesn't explore the full extent of Fred's politics, which I guess are too radical for some, and instead focuses on a more sanitized version of the Black Panthers. It certainly left out some vital information on the actual events, the main one being CONTELPRO, which the film kind of dances around mentioning. The acting is great, but the casting doesn't exactly hit the right mark, meaning that the two leads are and look much older than who they're supposed to portray. I know it's risky to cast young actors, but I never felt the two mains were young adults. For a sophomore effort, this wasn't half bad. It's a very striking piece that definitely hits a mark on today's environment. It's a biopic, so you can only expect so much. Being that you're greeted with great performances, overall great looking film, it's pretty easy to recommend all around. But of course, there's a crowd who obviously are not going to like this film. I'm going to have to give this one an 8.5. Max von Sydow throws out of 10. We have Minari. Minari is the fifth film by Lee Isaac Chung. His filmography is virtually unknown. With Minari, he's blowing up. Korean cinema as a whole has been on the rise. The film follows a bilingual Korean family taking a chance by building a farm from the ground up in 1980s Arkansas. The film's story mirrors the family's situation. In the first chunk, we don't know where this story wants to go because, well, this family doesn't know either. It's a story about finding your place in a new world. The family has hope, but no arrow leading them to a climactic finale. Steven Yeun has really come a long way, starring in a meh zombie show to working alongside great directors. Seriously, check out Burning, he's really good in that, and he's really good here. He plays Jacob, a very determined and savvy farmer. He alters between Korean and English at a whim. Being fluent in both languages lets him speak a naturally accented English. He's a well-meaning father, but flawed.
오케이. 그럼 물이 많은 데가 어디야?
There.
Why?
Because trees like water.
Yuri Han also does a good job as Monica the mother. Contrasting Jacob's determination, she's more cautious and caring. Her performance is much more subdued than Yeun's. Alan S. Kim and Noel Chu will play the kids, and surprise, surprise, they're pretty good. Yes, child actors who aren't terrible. They naturally seem like siblings, bickering and playing about. But the show stealer is Yoo Jong-yoo as the grandma. She appears annoying at first but becomes very layered as the story goes on. No spoilers, but she definitely has the most dynamic performance.
넣어먹고 찌개에도 넣어먹고 국에도 넣어먹고 미나리는 아플 땐 약도 되고 미나리는 원더풀이란다.
Really, the whole family dynamic is great. It gives a very homely feeling. Language plays a huge part. Each of the family members speaks their own varying degree of English and Korean. This shows us where their identity lies. The kids are caught in the middle since they speak both languages. Really, each of the characters are in their own story, which this film does really well. It gracefully balances tonal shifts. We can go from a family drama to a coming-of-age story. The film doesn't aim towards conflict, and instead is more slice of life. It's just a relaxing experience. The soundtrack is just as calming. Yumeo Moziri did a fine job composing the soundtrack, providing a blanket that leaves the viewer at ease. To complement the music, we have the lush cinematography done by Lachlan Minneal. The cinematography shows the course of nature, and the little things you just can't script. It makes great use of blocking to further show the character dynamics. Much of the shots are dedicated to nature, which heavily invoke Terrence Malick's work. Despite the naturey setting, Minari uses various lighting setups. Day or night, the film always has a little shine to it. Color correction is full of saturation and feels like a ripe fruit. Everything just feels so spotless. The pacing takes it slow and never rushes ahead, aiming for a mellow approach. For cons, would be that the film might feel safe for some because of the real lack of an opposing force. Due to this, the film might come across as directionless to some, and that the ending might be sort of obvious. It is highly recommendable. You can put this on just because and feel enamored. Minari gets an 8.5 to maybe a 9 out of 10. If you hate subtitles, please leave. Father is Florian Zeller's first feature film. The father in question has Alzheimer's and is in constant care from his daughter. Sounds like a simple Oscar Beatty sounding plot? Well, this is anything but. Anthony Hopkins, Sir Anthony Hopkins, plays the titular character, Anthony. The man has been giving us, 50, 60 years of iconic performances with 6 Oscar nominations under his belt. He first won because he ate people. Silence of the Lambs was an incredible, unsettling, and twisted performance. Well deserved. Now, with The Father, he has his 7th nomination, and Hopkins is equally incredible here. He's so charming at times, and so helpless, and so tense.
But she refuses to listen. I don't need any help from anyone. And I'm not going to leave my flat. All I want is for everyone to fuck off. Having said that, it's been a great pleasure. Au revoir.
It's childlike in nature. Anthony's voice is mixed noticeably high. It ensures we hear his every word, which is essential to the story. Olivia Colman plays the daughter, and Miss Coleman's been quite the staple of British television for a while. Her ventures into cinema have led her to win an Academy Award for The Favourite, a show-stealing, charming, and hilarious performance. Now with her second nom, Coleman is playing a literal fizzled caricature of a daughter. It's heartwarming to see her care for her sick father. She also really conveys the frustration in playing caretaker, the sense of trying to move the immovable. Olivia Williams is also in this film, and she's pretty good, where she plays an equally kind-hearted woman. Imogen Poots also does a fine job in her brief, pleasant performance. Really, everyone in this very tiny cast is solid. It's immediately noticeable that this film feels like a stage play. Well, Mr. Zeller is a playwright, and this was originally one of his plays, and you definitely feel that theater influence. It takes place mostly in one location, the characters constantly walking the scene, and there's various monologues. The film uses this style to its advantage. Every time a character enters, it brings a bit of tension on who exactly is going to walk in. The character of Anthony is his own unreliable narrator, so we never truly know what's happening outside where he's standing. The editing makes it seem as if time is bleeding upon itself. It flows in every direction at once. The way information is revealed is utterly frustrating and equally hopeless. It's not primer levels of confusion. Instead, the audience does know the gist of what's going on. They just don't know what's correct. The film looks very drabby. It's all gray and blue and very just depressing all around. The cinematography has a high depth of field most of the time, so everything is visible to us. No real fade to blacks, everything happens at once. It does a really effective job on familiarizing ourselves with the apartment's structure, which really helps with the loose time structure. The production design provides unease. It always feels like something is off, like a piece of furniture is gone or missing. So in other words, the film technically has no continuity errors because there is no continuity. The biggest flaw that I could think of is that the family in this film is relatively well off. They have a really big apartment and plenty of art deco. What I mean is that the film could have taken the extra step in showing how debilitating Alzheimer's is. The story is still tragic, but it might not feel as tragic to some. 8.5 to 9, Max von Sydow throws out of 10. It's recommendable, but you just can't put it on and turn your brain off. Oof. Let's try that again. It's pretty hopeless, so it's a grand old time with friends. You might even say, I wish I could forget the whole thing so I can watch it again. And well, that's the list. And how was the actual ceremony this year? Well, it's what you'd expect. It's the Academy Awards. The films are pretty good, but the ceremonies are always bleh. And this year's, due to unfortunate circumstances, looks like it was inspired by Steven Soderbergh. Something seemed really off with the image resolution. The entire time, it looked like it was broadcast in standard definition, and having the bars at the bottom and top just didn't help with the sublime image quality. And they pulled a Christopher Nolan by inconsistently having them. And something seemed wrong with the frame rate. It just looked cheap. Every time they panned, it just messed with my eyes. All the After Effects work done on this video looked much better than the graphics used for the actual ceremony. The opening monologue was cute, I guess. Professional bunny killer Glenn Close is apparently a big fan of hip-hop, as shown in a very funny segment. Spoilers, Pixar won again. Sure, this sounds like I'm just shitting all over the ceremony, but it's not all bad. The plus is that talented individuals are being rewarded. Some are well-deserved, some I can live with, and some, I don't know. At least Aaron Sorkin didn't win anything. And the cherry on top is Thomas Vindenberg winning his first Oscar for another round. Not only well-deserved, but he gave the best speech. Instead of recommending the ceremony, I'll recommend Another Round. Check it out. It's pretty funny, and it'll tug at your heartstrings, along with having an infectious depiction of friendship. Check out his other work while you're at it. And for some strange reason, Best Picture didn't go on last. I guess they were feeling quirky. Instead, Best Actor closed it off, resulting in the most wet fart of an ending possible. Anthony Hopkins didn't even show up. You go, Anthony. Did you expect the Academy Awards to be good? Because the best moments are when the show goes haywire. Think about it. What are the most memorable moments? My favorite moments include the streaker, Hollywood's hate boner towards Ella Kazan, Marlon Brando trolling the awards, John Travolta versus a name, La La
Moonlight, you guys won
winning
Best
the
Picture.
award, and my number one Oscar moment is Björk's swan dress, because Björk is the greatest, and I highly suggest you listen to her work.